40,000 years ago, somewhere in the dense forests of Ice Age Europe, a small band of Neanderthals gathered around a flickering fire. The night was bitter, the wind carrying a sharp chill, but the fire's glow kept the dark at bay. They were fewer than they once were, their kin scattered or gone. And though they could not have known it, they were among the last of their kind. At the edge of the forest, other beings watched. Not predators, but humans, Homo sapiens, our ancestors, taller and leaner, with strange tools, odd clothes, and a language that carried differently in the cold air. The two species had known of each other for generations, sometimes sharing land, sometimes sharing more. But the balance was shifting. The forests grew colder, the herds thinned, and the Neanderthals? They would soon disappear. But why? For decades, scientists imagined a simple answer. Humans wiped them out. But the truth is more complex, more human, and perhaps more tragic. Their extinction is not a story of conquest alone. It is a puzzle of love, disease, survival, and time itself.
To understand their end, we must first know who they were. The Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, were not just hairy brutes as once depicted. They were our closest relatives, branching off from a common ancestor with Homo sapiens around 600,000 years ago. While our ancestors evolved in Africa, the Neanderthals thrived in the harsh climates of Eurasia, from Portugal to the vast stretches of Siberia. Their bodies told the tale of adaptation. Stocky frames, short but powerful limbs, broad noses, and pronounced brow ridges, all perfect for conserving heat and enduring cold. Inside their robust skulls were brains often larger than ours, adapted for their environment, with cognitive capacities we're only beginning to understand. For years, scientists assumed Neanderthals were scavengers, eking out an existence on leftovers. But discoveries overturned this. They were skilled hunters, capable of bringing down mammoths, bison, and reindeer. Working in coordinated groups, they ambushed prey, wielding heavy thrusting spears, engaging at dangerously close range. Their diet was meat-heavy, fueling their demanding high-calorie lifestyles. But hunting was not their only skill. Their stone tools were sophisticated, sometimes even rivaling those of early humans. Archaeologists unearthed evidence of jewelry made from eagle talons, pigments possibly used as body paint, and abstract symbols on cave walls that hint at a symbiotic mind. Then there was Shanidar I, the elderly Neanderthal found in the caves of Iraq's Zagros Mountains. He was a man who had survived brutal injuries, a crushed skull, an amputated arm, and deafness, yet lived well into old age. Someone cared for him, fed him, protected him. Compassion, it seemed, was not unique to Homo sapiens. They lived in small bands, hunted, gathered, mourned their dead, and perhaps sang songs no one will ever hear again. They were not so different from us.
Around 60,000 years ago, the world changed. From Africa, Homo sapiens began a great exodus, fanning across continents, moving into lands long dominated by other hominins. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in the East. But new evidence suggests that our ancestors reached these shores even earlier. A human skull fragment found in Greece's Epidemia cave dates back 210,000 years, hinting that the crossings between species may have started far before we thought. These migrations were not single waves, but repeated movements, and each encounter carried the potential for both conflict and kinship. When humans met Neanderthals, they did more than trade territory. They exchanged genes. Every person of non-African descent today carries 1 to 3% Neanderthal DNA, a ghostly inheritance from ancient unions. They may have spoken, too, not just to each other, but within their tribes. Both species shared the FOXP2 gene, a crucial component for speech and language. What did Neanderthal speech sound like? We may never know, but it was likely guttural, structured, and purposeful. Different from any human tongue, yet fully a language of its own. We picture these encounters in myriad ways: weary glances across a clearing, cautious trade, violent skirmishes, and sometimes intimacy. Bones and DNA tell us that they bred. The remains of a girl known as Denny, found in the Denisova cave, carried proof of this mingling. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan. The boundaries between species blurred in the quiet of prehistoric nights. But every embrace, every child born of these unions carried consequences for both species. And as we spread, the Neanderthals began to fade.
When Neanderthals and Homo sapiens met, they did not remain strangers. Their shared ancestry ensured that interbreeding was possible, and it happened. But the question that lingers is, how? Were these encounters born of desire, of alliance, of necessity, or of coercion and violence? The archaeological record is silent on the matter, but DNA remembers what bones cannot tell. In Spain's El Cedrón cave, a Neanderthal tooth bore traces of a familiar microorganism, Methanobrevibacter oralis, a species that still lives in human mouths today. Such a bacterium transfers only through close, personal contact, likely through kissing or sexual intimacy. The implications are clear. These populations not only met, they mingled. Genetic studies reveal even more. HPV-16, a variant of the human papillomavirus, now common in non-African populations, seems to have crossed into humans from Neanderthals and Denisovans through sexual contact. Diseases, like genes, crossed invisible borders between species. Interbreeding was not just about gene flow, it also had demographic consequences. Every time a Neanderthal mated with a human and their offspring merged into human communities, a potential Neanderthal lineage was lost. With small and scattered populations, each Neanderthal who joined human groups reduced their own gene pool. Over time, these unions may have diluted and absorbed the Neanderthal population into ours, gradually erasing their distinct identity. Perhaps then, Neanderthal extinction was not a dramatic erasure, but a slow merging, a quiet fading through interbreeding, a love story with no survivors.
Yet, interbreeding alone does not explain everything. The Neanderthals lived in small, tightly knit groups, rarely more than 10 to 30 individuals per band. Such intimacy nurtured close social bonds, but it also carried a dangerous cost: inbreeding. Inbreeding narrows genetic diversity. It heightens the risk of congenital disorders, and among the Neanderthals, the evidence is tangible. The remains at El Cedrón revealed more than dietary patterns. They showed signs of deformities, like fused vertebrae, malformed ribs, and foot abnormalities. Out of 13 individuals, 17 congenital anomalies were identified, an alarming number for such a small group. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens were weaving a vast social network. Across continents, human groups met, traded, and exchanged not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and genes. These networks provided a safety net against inbreeding, ensured genetic vitality, and allowed knowledge to accumulate and spread. In times of conflict or resource scarcity, numbers mattered. If a Neanderthal group lost even a few members in battle or to illness, their survival was at risk. Humans, with their larger communities, could sustain losses, regroup, and press on. Cultural transmission was also an advantage. Innovations like more efficient tools,
better hunting strategies, and symbolic arts flowed through human networks. Neanderthal bands, isolated and fewer, had less access to such innovations. What doomed the Neanderthals may not have been inferior intelligence, but isolation, a loneliness encoded in their very social structure.
There was another enemy the Neanderthals could not see, could not fight, and could not escape: disease. When Homo sapiens left Africa, they carried more than tools and fire. They carried pathogens. Having evolved in the tropics, humans had long contended with a variety of zoonotic diseases transmitted from animals to humans. These included viruses and bacteria that Neanderthals had never encountered until it was too late. In small populations like those of the Neanderthals, diseases spread differently. Outbreaks might have remained sporadic, burning through a group and vanishing. But repeated exposure from human newcomers meant that new diseases arrived constantly, a relentless onslaught for which Neanderthals had no immunity. Some infections became chronic, weakening Neanderthal individuals over time, sapping their strength, reducing fertility, and impairing their ability to hunt, gather, and survive. Even interbreeding may have been a vector for these silent killers, embedding diseases within Neanderthal populations that had never before faced them. Why did humans carry more diseases? The answer may lie in our African origins, where dense populations and varied wildlife created perfect conditions for pathogens to evolve and spread. Evidence suggests that viruses like herpes simplex 2 jumped from chimpanzees to our ancestors around 1.6 million years ago, and that such zoonotic transmissions continued throughout human history. For Neanderthals, every encounter with humans was a gamble, not just with swords or spears, but with their very biology. Their genetic diversity was too low, their numbers too few, and their immune defenses too limited. While we often think of extinction as a dramatic clash, for the Neanderthals, it may have come not with a battle, but with a cough, a fever, and a slow, quiet death.
As if isolation, dwindling numbers, and disease were not enough, the Neanderthals faced yet another formidable adversary: the climate itself. Around 40,000 years ago, the Earth entered a period of intense climatic instability, part of the broader fluctuations of the last ice age. Temperatures plummeted, ice sheets advanced, and the environment transformed. One particularly harsh phase, known as Heinrich Stadio 4, struck around 39,000 years ago, a cold, dry period linked to massive discharges of icebergs into the North Atlantic. For Neanderthals, already struggling to maintain their fragile foothold, this was another devastating blow. Their world changed around them. Forests thinned into grasslands. The large game they depended on, mammoths, reindeer, bison, grew scarce or migrated. Neanderthals, adapted to forest hunting and ambush tactics, may have found the open plains less hospitable than Homo sapiens, who had broader diets and more flexible survival strategies. Scientific studies of speleothems, mineral deposits in caves, in regions like the Carpathian Mountains, reveal clear markers of two major cold spells between 44,000 and 40,000 years ago. Researchers suggest that Neanderthal populations, already fragmented, dwindled further during these cold intervals, perhaps driven into refuges or forced into contact with expanding human populations. Neanderthals had adapted to many glacial cycles before. They moved with the changing climate, hunted different species, and crafted tools to suit their needs. But this time was different. The stresses of environmental change, interbreeding, disease, and small population sizes converged. Their niche shrank too far, their resilience too strained. And as the ice advanced, so too did the humans, adaptable, numerous, and diverse in their ways of living. For much of the 20th century, the story was told as a simple tale of survival of the fittest.
Homo sapiens outcompeted Neanderthals because we were smarter, more innovative, and better organized. It was an idea that fit neatly with human pride, but one that modern research has steadily dismantled. Early interpretations, like those of French paleontologist Marcellin Boulay, painted Neanderthals as brutish, hunched, and dim-witted. Boulay's studies of a severely arthritic Neanderthal fossil shaped a distorted view that lasted for decades. But we now know that the hunched posture was due to disease, not design. In truth, Neanderthals were intelligent, empathetic, and capable. They mastered complex tools, created jewelry, practiced symbolic behavior, and cared for their injured and elderly. Their burials suggest ritual or at least a deep social bond. They painted caves, made personal ornaments, and crafted effective hunting weapons. Were they less than us? In many ways, no. But they were different. Where humans formed sprawling social networks, Neanderthals remained insular. Where humans diversified their diets to include fish, plants, and small game, Neanderthals remained largely reliant on big game hunting. Where humans innovated and adapted rapidly, Neanderthals changed more slowly, perhaps constrained by smaller social circles. Did warfare play a role? It's possible. Groups of humans and Neanderthals may have clashed over resources, but there is no conclusive evidence of systematic violence or genocide. If anything, the traces we find are of interbreeding, not extermination. Instead, Neanderthal extinction was likely a slow erosion, not a swift conquest. Death by 1,000 small cuts. Isolation, disease, climate change, reduced fertility, and yes, absorption into the human gene pool.
We often imagine Neanderthals as a tragic exception, a species that came so close to us but fell just short. But their extinction was not unique. In the grand story of Earth's history, extinction is common. The late Pleistocene, the period in which Neanderthals vanished, saw the loss of over 100 species of large mammals, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths. The Neanderthals were part of this wave. Even before Homo sapiens spread widely, Neanderthal populations were already shrinking, fragmenting, losing genetic diversity. In some regions, they disappeared before any significant human contact. The clock was ticking on them, regardless of our arrival. Yet the debate continues. Some anthropologists argue for climate as the decisive factor. Others point to disease, interbreeding, or competition. Most agree now that it was not a single cause, but a perfect storm of pressures that tipped the balance. The truth is, Neanderthals were not simply beaten. They were, in a way, us. They lived, loved, struggled, and adapted. And in the end, part of them survived. Every human today of non-African descent carries their legacy in 1 to 3% of their DNA. In that sense, they never wholly disappeared. They are not just an extinct species. They are our cousins, whose blood still echoes in our veins.